Falun Gong practitioner in China managed to survive having his organs harvested and escape China. Now he's ready to tell his harrowing tale. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. Over the years, we've done several videos on the Chinese Communist Party's gruesome practice of forced organ harvesting. I'll link to some of those videos below if you want to check them out. The CCP targets prisoners, political dissidents, and ethno-religious minorities for this practice, often executing them just to steal their organs. It's like a game of operation gone terribly, terribly wrong. Despite the CCP's attempts to cover it up, their forced organ harvesting is no secret. Back in 2019, an independent international tribunal concluded that China forcefully harvests organs from detainees. And in 2021, UN human rights experts expressed concern that China was targeting Uyghurs, Tibetans, Falun Gong practitioners, and other prisoners of conscience for forced organ harvesting, saying they are deeply concerned about reports of discriminatory treatment of the prisoners or detainees based on their ethnicity and religion or belief. Just not deeply concerned enough to kick China off the UN Human Rights Council. But since this is the CCP we're talking about, it's been very difficult to actually determine the scale of this gruesome practice, and hard evidence has been hard to come by. David Mattis, an international human rights lawyer who is particularly engaged in the issue, even said that this particular issue required intensive research, as there are no surviving victims, no bodies to autopsy, and no easily accessible crime scenes or documents. The bodies are often cremated after organ harvesting, so there is nothing physically to look at. Until now. But I'll get to that in a moment. Previously, evidence was all circumstantial, but very compelling. One key bit of evidence was found in China's booming organ transplant industry. According to The Telegraph, in the decades after Falun Gong was banned and its followers were persecuted, China's organ transplantation industry exploded. Vital organs became readily available within a matter of days in state-run hospitals, a time frame no national transplantation system elsewhere in the world has ever been able to achieve. Mattis believes that in China, over 100,000 people are killed every year for their organs. So I guess I was wrong all those times I called the CCP heartless. Turns out they have an abundance of them. But there is now one man who lived to tell the tale. His name is Cheng Ming. He's the first known survivor of China's forced organ harvesting, and now he's speaking out. Cheng is from a rural village in Shandong province. He was repeatedly detained and tortured between 1999 and 2004 for practicing Falun Gong, a spiritual practice rooted in Buddhist traditions. We've done a lot of videos on that too, since Falun Gong practitioners are some of the most targeted for organ harvesting. I can link to those videos below as well. But briefly, Falun Gong is a Chinese Qigong practice, think Tai Chi, that at its height of popularity had 100 million people practicing it, which meant more people were practicing Falun Gong than were members of the Chinese Communist Party. A brutal persecution followed involving forced organ harvesting that continues to this day. In an interview with The Diplomat, Cheng told a reporter how his story began, saying, "One day, in 2002, I was told to pack up and was suddenly transferred to Harbin prison and later to Daqing prison. It was there I was tortured even more severely." The torture that he experienced was intense.
Under the orders of Jiang Zemin, the former leaders of the Chinese Communist Party, who ordered the physical examinations of Falun Gong practitioners and state that beating them to death counts as nothing. The prison guards subjected me to endless and extreme humiliation and torture to force me to renounce my faith. This includes forced injection of salt water, being suspended in mid-air, continuous electric shocks to my body, and even to the sensitive areas such as the genitals.
Cheng even underwent a horrifying process called the Big Stretch, a form of torture where all four limbs are stretched in different directions. But it wasn't just physical torture, it was mental as well. Cheng was told that he should drop his faith in Falun Gong or his wife would be forced to divorce him. And if she didn't, the authorities threatened to treat her the exact same way. His family also underwent similar psychological terror. Eventually, in protest against the torture, Cheng swallowed a blunt blade and a small rusty nail. Cheng used a translator in his recent press conference explaining what happened next.
In November 2004, I was forcibly taken to the fourth hospital of Cheng by the Chinese Communist Party, where I underwent the only surgery of my life, a thoracotomy that left me with a 35-centimeter scar.
He also showed the audience the results. Cheng's family was told that there was an 80% mortality rate for the operation that he had to undergo to remove the swallowed items, even though he refused any surgery. But Cheng said that he was held down, injected with something, blacked out, and that when he woke up, he was still in the hospital and felt a terrible pain in his side. He also had been shackled to the bed and had a bloody tube connected to him. If Cheng had swallowed the blunt blade and rusty nail in any normal country, he would have undergone x-rays, perhaps a CT scan, and if necessary, an endoscopy, followed by a less intense procedure. Instead, he woke to find an IV tube taped to his foot, oxygen tubes in his nose, a drainage tube in his left chest, and a 35-centimeter incision in the same area. To this day, Cheng still suffers painful side effects from the so-called procedure.
The 35-centimeter scar on my left rib cage throbs with every beat of my pulse, and with each beat, the pain is unbearable. At night, I struggle to breathe, making it difficult to fall asleep.
He also remembers that alongside the doctor in the room, there were officials from the 610 office, the CCP's secretive and powerful organization tasked with cracking down on Falun Gong. Despite suffering from shortness of breath and fatigue after being returned to Dacheng prison, he was still tortured for refusing to renounce Falun Gong. After a March 2006 hunger strike, Cheng was transferred to Dacheng Longnan Hospital. A prison guard told his sister that he needed an operation because he had swallowed a small knife. Cheng maintains that he had not swallowed any object and had no medical condition necessitating surgery. But this time, neither Cheng nor his family were even asked for consent to the operation. Cheng believed that whatever the CCP had planned for him this time, he would not survive. But what came next was a bit of luck. Cheng asked the guard to unshackle him to use the restroom down the hall. But when he came back, the guard had fallen asleep. He told a reporter from the Diplomat that, "I noticed the fire escape on my way to the restroom and I knew where it was so I could use this to try and escape out of the hospital. I ran downstairs and called a cab in front of the hospital and quickly went out of the area into Tianjin City." Cheng then fled to a UN refugee camp in Thailand, evading the CCP for years before finally arriving in the US back in 2020. Professor Sen Ni has been helping rescue prisoners of conscience for decades and played a pivotal role in bringing Cheng to the US at the outset of the pandemic after seeing a 2015 photo of his scar. Dr. Ni told Diplomat that seeing the photo touched me deeply and I decided to help him. I visited members of Congress, foreign affairs committees, and senators, many of whom were very touched and wrote letters of support. Even though the process took 5 years and he was close to giving up, the efforts finally paid off for Cheng. And it was in the US that he underwent a series of medical tests showing him this.
After arriving in the United States and undergoing medical examinations, the doctors informed me that half of my left liver and lower left lung have been surgically removed.
So for several years, without even knowing it, Cheng was living with 1.5 lungs and a partial liver. Cheng still has nightmares about his ordeal, but is determined to continue spreading awareness about Beijing's forced organ harvesting.
I urge the international community to put pressure on the Chinese Communist Party to open its prisons and hospitals and to allow international human rights and medical organizations to conduct independent investigations into forced organ harvesting and the surgical removal of my left liver and lower left lung.
He continues to stand with his fellow Falun Gong practitioners.
In my heart, I carry a promise to my fellow Falun Gong practitioners who are still enduring torture in prison. We make a pact. Whoever survives must tell the world the truth. Unfortunately, many of them have since disappeared without a trace.
What's truly remarkable is that now there is living proof of the CCP's organ harvesting. And that's important because a few months ago, the US House passed the Falun Gong Protection Act that would sanction people engaged in the involuntary harvesting of organs in China. But the Chinese Communist Party isn't taking this laying down. It has a plan to wipe out Falun Gong once and for all and turn the American people against it. I have a full video about that, which you should definitely watch in order to avoid falling into the CCP's trap. Click here to check it out. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.